Well, welcome to tonight's lockdown webinar series, brought to you in association with British Rowing's official analytics partner SAS, working to help give you the power to row. So tonight's topic is about creativity, practicalities and having a bit of fun. So I'd like to introduce Nick Baker and Erin Kennedy. So Nick has been a GB rowing team high performance coach for over 7 years now and was one half of the coaching team that oversaw the team's domination at the Rio 26 Paralympic Games. Since then, he's supported the PR3 Cox 4 to 3 consecutive gold medals at the World Championships. Now, I've known Nick for a little while and he's always curious about how to get the best out of himself and also to improve the outcome for the athletes that he supports. So it really didn't surprise me when he suggested that that tonight you might be interested in hearing what it's like for one of the athletes on the receiving end of his coaching. So I'm also really pleased to welcome Erin Kennedy. So Erin joined the Para Squad in 2018 and was integral to the success of the PR4 Cox 4 at the 2018 and 2019 World Championships. She's graduated from Oxford University, having coxed at the boat race, and is currently studying for a psychology diploma alongside her squad commitments. But before we kick off, just a little bit of housekeeping. The webinars will be recorded and will be available shortly after tonight's live session. But we encourage you all to ask questions using the question tab on the side of your screen. Due to the audience tonight, we do have everybody on mute. And any questions we don't get to answer tonight will be posted on the website in a few days' time. So without further ado, welcome Nick and Erin.
Thanks very much. So welcome everyone, thanks for coming along. This is very much designed, this webinar, to just be a window into some of the changes we've made to our programme in this slightly strange world we now find ourselves in with the current pandemic. So I hope that you can take at least one thing away that is useful as you go back to your clubs, and it can change things you're doing there positively somehow. Okay, so please have an open mind and yeah, welcome.
So Nick, we've been hearing from quite a lot of the areas of the rowing community about how they're managing in lockdown. So I guess a question for you is around the challenges that lockdown has posed for your team.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword for us. We obviously lost the Paralympic Games this year as well, so that's now had a confirmed date of next in 2021. In September. So obviously our athletes are having to deal with the change in training environment, very abrupt change in training environment, as is everyone, and also deal with the fact that there's now another year been inserted into this Paralympiad. So I think it'll be the first ever 5-year Paralympiad or Olympiad we've had, which is interesting. I think, you know, my sympathy goes out to the entire rowing world, because this has not been the year for rowing, whether it's been rain or wind or COVID-19, there's been all sorts of things getting in the way of our sport, and it's been a real challenge. And I think, you know, a lot of rowing clubs will have lost their landmark events as well, which also can be their main source of revenue, which is another challenge. It's been really tough for our sport for sure. But for my rowers in particular, we've had a few guys that are obviously planning on retiring, might have been planning further education on the other side of the games. We might have had a few that have had a really tough Paralympiad and we're really looking forward to a rest and perhaps then deciding whether or not they carry on their elite careers in the sport. So there's been a lot of challenges that we've had to work through with our guys, and we actually just decided to give them a week off once that decision was made, train by themselves, get some headspace and just digest and come to terms with some of the questions they might want to work through with us as a staff team. The other challenge for us is obviously we've been refining our programme for the last 4 years to work very specifically towards peaking this summer. We've now got to step away from that and redesign what we're trying to do and how we can now get our guys to peak performance next year. And that's definitely come with its challenges. I'm sure everyone can relate to that in some way or another. The upside to that, if you want to sort of take the cup half full approach, is that we've got another season to refine it even further and hopefully take our guys that little bit further towards those gold medal times we work towards. Our support staff have been brilliant. they've had to find some creative ways to offer remote support, and I think they're doing a great job. Our physio has been sending out various videos, bits and bobs, exercises remotely, doing some video calls with some of the athletes to make sure they're moving well. So that's been really good for Pat to get up to date with some of the technology and work through that. Our S&C coach, Tom, he's been doing a brilliant job with an app called Train Heroic. So he's now being able to program, monitor, and actually coach remotely via an app, which has been really creative on his front and been really, really good for our athletes and kept the quality of their S&C training up whilst they're at home. On the training equipment side, we sort of set up a very quick coaching sort of Uber service where we ran around delivering various bits of equipment in a truck just before lockdown was in full effect. So luckily, a lot of our athletes have got kit at home to do a reasonable amount of the training that we would have liked them to do in this period. And there's also been a lot of community gyms that have been very, very generous and allowed our athletes to take bits and bobs home, which we've really appreciated. So after the scale of what was unfolding became clear with the COVID-19 pandemic, Tom and I, the chief coach, basically agreed that the focus was now to take the pressure off the squad while still providing them with routine and challenge, and keeping the close-knit community we've worked so hard to develop tight and looking after each other in this period. When we were considering how we reprogram for the summer, we were cognizant the rower support network, equipment, training atmosphere, all those bits that they have so good at Caversham would be heavily compromised. So we would have to be quite careful with the volume and the type of training to allow for this. Yeah. Thanks, Erin.
That's great. Thank you, Nick. That was a really, really comprehensive answer. So I guess last week we heard from Ellie, George and Matt about what it was like for them in lockdown. And I guess a question for you, Erin, is around how have you been communicating as a group since you kind of left Caversham? Have there been some tips and hints that you're able to share about your experience?
Yeah, so I think we're really lucky as a group that we have a great group of athletes and we work already very closely with each other on a daily basis. And because across the three classifications, PR1, 2 and 3 that are in para rowing, it's not a giant athlete body. So where we maybe have the advantage and we're able to kind of use that is that we can all meet as a squad. So kind of a full Paralympic complement would be 9. We train centrally at the moment as a group of 8. Plus then we have kind of our coaches and support staff. So I think straight away that's great that we can actually all meet together. So generally the way we've been communicating, just like everyone else, has been Zoom or whatever video conferencing service you like to use. But I think we've been trying to push it out there a little bit more rather than just kind of death by video calling, you know, people on mute, bad connections and things like that. So we've set up, there's kind of a regular compulsory Tuesday morning meeting, 8:30, and that's sort of, a lot of that is admin, you know, making sure we know what we're doing in the week, catching up, not every week, but most weeks, sort of checking in on how people are doing, and then kind of supplementing that are the more sort of optional kind of engagements which all happen over Zoom. So that's mostly sort of video training calls. So you know, we're used to training together. We're all part of a team sport. We're not used to this kind of independent training like you know, some of the other athletes in other sports. And I know a lot of us have really enjoyed sort of training together and really missed that. So we've set up regular training calls. Kind of the key most attended are the pieces and challenge sessions, which are always at 10 o'clock on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Saturdays. Coaches join in as well. We've even had guest appearances from our psych, our S&C coach. Well, he only did it once because I think he realised he actually set himself a really hard circuit because he didn't have a bike, so he skipped for about 35 minutes, and he's not been back since. But you know, we've had a lot of that, and we've also encouraged other people to join us on our calls as well. we've had people from so Alice Ty, who's a Paralympic swimmer. She came and joined us. Anna, I think her name's Anna Scott, but I know her as Scotty. She's a guide in Paralympic cycling. She came and joined us for a session. I think we scared her away because, again, she hasn't come back. But we've been really enjoying sort of engaging with lots of people. And I think a key part of, you know, how we're communicating is coming from the coaches, which I think has been really positive, is just essentially focusing just on training as something that's enjoyable, something that you should want to do. And if you don't want to do it and you're having, you know, a tougher time, then there's flexibility in that training. You can, you know, get out on your bike if the weather's nice, or go for a push, or, you know, see how you're feeling, and there is flexibility around the training. So there's definitely a good balance between accountability, making sure we're getting the training and we're staying fit, but also, you know, there's a human side to all of this, which I think is being kind of really considered from the squad. You know, Nick mentioned the train heroic. That's really good. I'm a coxswain, so my training was a little bit different, but I've definitely been training more in isolation than I probably did ever before. I've been doing a lot of S&C in the last season just to try and help me in the four, not kind of break my neck. And I'm a bit sad because I actually was starting to get quite good at pull-ups, but unfortunately I don't have a pull-up bar. But I've been doing a lot of weights, and Train Heroic's been great because I'm not a seasoned lifter, so there's lots of videos on there which is helping to show us sort of like how to do different sessions. And then, you know, we're just having individual conversations with the coaches, just like we would. We've got a full squad WhatsApp group with, you know, the same sort of terrible memes going around that we always did. So I think a big thing for me is, like, we're communicating really effectively, but it's not too much, and it's not really far away from the way we communicated before. It's just we're having to sort of enforce it a little bit more on some of those group things. I think we've got a video of us training as a group, which might come up. So this is what pretty much our Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Saturdays tend to look like. I'm not sure if there's any sound, but if there is, it's probably just people.
I think I managed to get rid of that.
Okay, that's good.
For a second. Yeah, this is just a window into how we've been doing it. I'm sure this is how many people have been choosing to do this, so it might be familiar or not. There we go.
This is actually great. So in the middle, you've got William, that's our psych. And then middle right, that's Tom Dyson, chief coach. And then underneath, bottom right, that's Alice Ty. She's yeah.
Okay. Very good. Oh.
Just a quick question on that then. Do you think there's anything you'll take forwards from this when you come back together in Caversham? Any lessons you're kind of learning, any sort of practices that you think you might be able to transfer when you come back together again?
Sorry, was that to me?
Either of you, yeah. Just how you're finding, you know, the as I say, the kind of enhanced communications that you're having.
Go on, Erin, you take that one.
Yeah, I think actually what it's maybe taught us is, I don't know, I think as individual athletes, it's maybe shown us what we really enjoy and what it is around the training specifically that you know, we're really engaging with. So, you know, we've got two boys in the PR3-4, and one of them is just absolutely loving getting out on his bike. Maybe not today, the weather's not great, but generally he's been loving the training on his bike. And then the other guys is just loves the erg, so much erging, and so it's given us a flexibility and the freedom. But I think with the communication side of things, I could see us carrying on using Train Heroic, because I think that's really productive, and it also is probably really helpful for the times when Tom, our S&C coach, isn't available, that we have sort of access to training programs and new programs which are fairly self-explanatory. And on top of that, I think the video side of things is just sort of reassuring everyone that actually kind of training together really does kind of motivate and keep people engaged. So it's the potential that you know, if we have other scenarios where this sort of thing happens, or if we're in our breaks and we want to do some training together, then it's a really easy thing to schedule a session and jump on a call.
It's definitely reinforced to me as well just how important some of the casual interactions are, where it's not you're not going into a conversation with any particular agenda, you're just being a bit more creative and giving people space and time to think and just have open conversations. And quite often at Caversham we'll sit with the athletes over breakfast and just give them space to talk, and it's where you have some of your best communication. It's a very relaxed, you know, unoffensive environment. The guys are much more willing to open up one-to-one in that relaxed environment. And I think the danger with video calls is that from the first second to the last second, you can feel under pressure to work because no one really wants to be on them. And I think it's really important to keep those casual, relaxed interactions where there isn't an agenda and you can still be creative and just have those calm interactions with your athletes.
Thank you both for that, for sharing that. Now, there's been also speculation about what the rowing landscape is going to look like when we start to ease out of lockdown. And a question for you, Nick. How are you balancing performance versus enjoyment of the sport in the new summer programme, given the situation? Okay,
so let me just share. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Let me just share what we've chosen to do. So this was the first sort of training program that we sent out after we'd had a bit of a sit down and a bit of a think, actually, after all the announcements came out. And as I've mentioned, for us, the summer really was now about getting the athletes to the beginning of next season fit, healthy, safe, and ready to do another year at Paralympic intensity. So what we chose to do is actually step back a little bit and perhaps move away from some of the conventional performance testing ergos that we might use to reduce that psychological pressure of knowing your scores, knowing that you're up against a PB when you're trying to operate in a really suboptimal environment with all the pressures that are in the community with COVID-19 at the moment. It's not a great place to try and produce PBs, and they don't have the same support that they've had at Caversham or the same atmosphere. So we chose to just take a bit of a step down in intensity. And actually the first thing that we decided to prioritize was just give the guys a daily routine and structure to make sure they didn't just drift into sort of later and later bedtimes, later and later get-ups with no real purpose to the day. So we said as an absolute bare minimum, this part up the top here was how we wanted the guys to structure the day. And that, you know, they're used to operating at Caversham, where it's a reasonably prescriptive environment. They live their lives by the training program, and I think that's why we chose to give them structure as early as possible and something to work within. We chose to put in 2 challenge ergos a week, which can be submitted at any time, but we really encourage the guys to do those together over video call and create the kind of atmosphere and environment that we'd normally have at Caversham. We slotted in 2 steady ergos, 2 biathlons, just to make sure that we've got plenty of aerobic base still ticking along in the background. We put in some power strokes to try and make sure that we had some rowing specific force production still in there. And we've changed how that looks as we go through the weeks, but that's always a feature on a Tuesday. We've put in a reasonable number of cross training sessions. We've got 2 to 3 sessions, and we've really encouraged variety on those. So whatever way, form, shape, however that looks, we've encouraged the guys to just mix it up. So they're always looking forward to it. It's always a bit new, and they're not getting stale on those, just chunking away the minutes at those UT2, UT1 intensities. We started off with a benchmark ergo, which we were something like a 5K or a 310s, one of our sort of performance marker ergos that we know well, to try and keep tags on how people are really doing. But we've chosen to be quite flexible with that, depending on the mood state of the group. For example, next week we've chosen to replace that with another challenge ergo because people were just starting to feel the training and the motivation was just slipping away a touch. and we didn't want to risk really pushing them the wrong way by putting them under pressure and having to perform against a known performance target. And yeah, some of the key points down the bottom there, you can see how we're try to run it. So the consistency of training is important. The intensity step back a touch. The S&C is very much around maintaining strength, not really pushing on in a slightly less optimal environment for that type of training. We're trying to keep trunks, hips, shoulders all safe and well supported to keep the guys training well without the physio input and the other support they've got at Caversham, and make sure that they're all staying on top of their prehab with their foam rolling, massage, other bits and bobs that our physio works hard on with the guys in the morning. And then, yeah, just really pushing the guys so that training needs to be at a level that allows you to complete the week healthily, both physically and mentally. And the mentally part's really important. We didn't want people to be getting onto ergos, dreading it, and just getting further and further away from enjoying rowing. Yeah.
I'd say, like, to back up what Nick was saying as well, I think that a lot of what we've been working on as a squad over the past kind of couple of years is really making it okay for you to say that you're not just feeling great. And as we've seen in this scenario, things ebb and flow so much, and you'll see that within your own households, within your kind of the athletes that you guys are dealing with, and it's being kind of having empathy and an understanding of everyone's individual scenario, whilst also kind of balancing that with performance and trying to kind of maintain some fitness. So I think that's been something that's been really positive and really well received from the athlete group.
Nick, I have a follow-up question. In so much that how are you using Erin to support you in delivering the program?
Well, this has been a challenge, to be honest. Like Erin, luckily for Erin, like she's actually our athlete rep. So she's been doing some really good work in the background with the athlete rep group and Brendan as well. Keeping tagged on some of the issues that are going on, COVID has flagged up. She's doing a good job of communicating some of that back to the athlete group on the Tuesday meetings. And Erin is also, outside of the coxing, she's kind of the social hub of the group. So she acts as quite a good conduit sometimes between coaches and athletes and coaches. And I think that extra sort of layer of communication who can move between the two, especially at times like this where people might be feeling under pressure and not communicating as well, has been really valuable for us.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that happened when we went into lockdown, I was like, what does a cox do in lockdown? There's only so many rowing videos you can watch, really. But yeah, as an athlete rep, I represent the squad to performance director and I've sat on a few kind of interesting phone calls with kind of the FISA kind of athletes commission and things like that. So that's been really useful. And for coaches out there who have coxswains who are in a similar position, I'd encourage them to get stuck into their conditioning and S&C, because I actually think that's been something that's been really productive and helpful for me in the boat, and making sure that I'm actually comfortable and able to stay still, and there's marginal gains, but also the athletes really enjoy seeing me suffer, but seeing that you're sort of you're taking care of yourself and you're putting yourself through your paces. But also I think that's why I've been doing some of the psychology studying, and just trying to think outside the box of how I can support the athletes, because I think a lot of what a coxswain does is it's a lot more subjective, and working with individuals and just keeping up with people, making sure people are doing okay, and then sort of having that conversation with coaches if you ever feel that maybe this person could do with a phone call this week, maybe this person could do without.
Fantastic, thank you both for that. And now I know, Nick, that both you and Tom are innovators. So I have to ask the question, what sort of challenges have you and Tom been creating on the rowing machines?
Oh, okay. So we definitely went a bit left field, and like I mentioned, the reason for doing that is, most of the sort of known performance ergos we use at Caversham, the guys operate, they make very small steps in their PBs. They're already operating at quite a high level, and they produce those under the optimal environment conditions and support at Caversham. So I think if we were to put too many of those on the programme now, without all of that support and the atmosphere around them, if the guys sort of constantly just fall short of those PBs, it's a really dangerous downward cycle to get into, where they start to get frustrated, and they start to almost get the fear of getting onto the ergo on those days, knowing that they haven't got everything in place to produce their best performance. But being competitive people they are, they're always going to try, and you end up just fighting and fighting. And in this period, we were so strong on saying we're just trying to get you through to September fit, healthy, and ready to complete another season. We didn't need to push them too hard this summer. It's difficult because you've got to balance that with a sense of purpose and some sort of sense of achievement over the summer. So what we chose to do was basically, look around the world of sport and get a bit creative. We took a little bit of inspiration from something like Zwift and tried to create our own sort of rowing version of that. So I'll just try and share one of them on the screen. So hopefully you can see that. This was the first one that we came up with. So we chose to design an ergo that was based off of the fastest ever ascent of Alpe d'Huez. So from memory, it was 37 minutes and 12 seconds. And based off of various people's PBs on the ergo over 2K, we changed the splits as the gradient changed as you go up the hill. So you can see those highlighted areas on the diagram in the middle. We basically fluctuated the splits up and down, harder and lighter as we went through the gradient changes. And essentially, it's a UT1 ergo with a bit of UT2 blended in there, but it's just something that's fun, engaging. It takes their mind off of, the daily grind or ergos they know, and it's just something to get excited about and get stuck into as a squad and experience for the first time together, because no one had ever done this before. And there was quite a few athletes almost getting the nerves because it was unknown. It was like the first time they'd got on an ergo or in a boat all those years ago. They were just excited about trying something new, and they were still completing the training at the kind of intensity and quality that we want them to without getting bored of it. So that was the first one we tried. As you can see, we ended up having three of our support staff on this one in various formats. We had some running, some skipping. Tom and myself were on the ski ergs. We had quite a few people on bikes, and then the rest of them.
Scotty didn't come back for, so
yeah, we might have pushed her over the edge a little bit with this one. But no, that was really good fun, and everyone was buzzing after the call. It was really nice to have that 10 minutes post challenge where everyone was just really excited, just chatting about their experience, and you've got that connection you normally have at Caversham as well once you finish something hard. This was another one we tried. This was one of Tommy D's great ideas. So we chose the highest mountain in the world, obviously Everest, at 8,848 meters, and we basically divided it into 4 sections. So we started off with quite a long, heavy UT2 haul. We moved into the sort of valley of silence, as we called, where things just stepped on a touch. And then as we moved into the final 2 sections, we really stepped the splits up and actually let the guys go loose in that sort of 8,000 meter plus zone, which we know is called the death zone. So basically just let them go for the summit from that point. And I'm sure some people are looking there thinking, oh, this might be a little bit childish, but it's actually really fun. Like if you try it yourselves, it's completely different. You don't feel like you're getting on an ergo to cover 8,000 meters because you're so switched on to what's happening next, where things are going to change, how you're going to approach the next bit. So we really enjoyed that. And as you can see on this one, we've, the way that Tom has presented this back to the athletes is really fun as well. It just makes you feel like you've been part of something quite special. We had people from different sports again here. We even had one of the athletes' parents join in for some of the challenges. So we've just been building a community of exercise and fun alongside doing the training that we need to do to keep the guys fit. Yeah, so it's been really fun. I don't know if you've got any comments, Erin, from having experienced some of them yourself.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, is that particularly the Saturday ergos are probably the best attended and also the sort of most inventive, and you definitely don't feel like you're just getting on an ergo or getting on a bike for the next 30 minutes, because also we're using Zoom and we're able, we can talk to each other through it. You've got, it's like, you're training together because you've got people shouting through, calling the changes and sort of some of the ergos, you've got some people finishing before others. So people sat there kind of cheering their teammates on to the last couple of strokes, and that's just like it is when we're at training. So it does sort of build that atmosphere and it sets you up really well. So yeah, I've been enjoying it.
Thank you both for giving us a bit of insight into those sessions. Now, as coaches, we're all striving to create really engaging sessions for our athletes, and particularly in what, Nick, you've described as being a bit of a suboptimal training environment. I think this is probably a question for Erin. How has this been received by the rowers, and what is it like to step away from the traditional performance measures?
I think it's been really well received from the athletes, because I think it's just reinforced that this is different. This is unprecedented. We are in, everyone in the world, not just athletes, but we're all in a position where we are going to talk about this for the rest of our lives, and it's not just about the games, it's not just about sport, and so I think if there's any time to step away and deviate from the norm, it's now. I think that what Nick said in terms of kind of moving away from what we know to something that's a little bit more unknown is really effective from a mental health perspective, because we've got athletes who are training on ergos that have been sat in a garage for however, who knows how long. We're not in a position to get physio, we can't be treated well. We're training in, I'm training in the kitchen because it's the only place that's not carpeted. And it's not an ideal place for anybody to be sort of pulling PBs, and actually there's also a question of really, if you're starting to pull PBs now, are you actually working too hard and sort of blowing yourself up? Because we've got a long old time until the games, and really we want those best performances to be coming not this summer but next summer. So I think actually, we had a meeting this morning at 8:30, our normal Tuesday morning meeting, and as Nick said, the opportunity was given to the athletes is whether they want to do the challenge ergo or they had the opportunity to do a significant marker piece and redo a piece that they could have done, they did earlier in the season if they wanted and they weren't very happy with their score. And all but one said actually they'd just rather do a challenge ergo, because actually right now PBs aren't what's important to our squad necessarily. It's enjoying the training, enjoying what we're doing together, and keeping ourselves in the right frame of mind ready for next season. So I'd say that was a marker this morning that all but one chose to do that, and that's because of the sort of culture and the identity that we've sort of started to build as a lockdown Paralympic squad.
So while the rowing community is kind of worrying a little bit about that rowers could be dropping out of our sport, Erin, have you got any other examples of things that you're doing to keep the community connected, and as importantly, how you're enjoying this time together?
Yeah, I'd say there's going to be a concern across all sports. I'd imagine that they're going to be losing membership, but actually I think that sport is going to be something that really brings us all together once we leave lockdown. I think that's almost surprised me. I wouldn't say I'm an avid sports fan, but my husband definitely is, and like not having Wimbledon this summer and not having the Formula One season to mark yourself against, and all these other things, I think it was going to be a summer of sport, and I think that's why the games being postponed, it's going to be really exciting, because it's not just the games that's happening next year, but we hope that the whole year of sport will be kind of rescheduled and it will be even more exciting. So I'd like to hope that will be inspirational and will hopefully keep athletes engaged in the sport. But a lot of what we're doing is not training related. I'm really lucky to consider all of my teammates friends as well as colleagues, and so the normal conversation and communication that we had has maintained. Too many WhatsApp groups. I think everyone's on too many WhatsApp groups probably at the moment, but we're all communicating as we did before. But But I think that probably shows in that, you know, last week it was Lauren Rolls, who's our PR2 woman. It was her birthday, and you know, everyone was on that 8:30 call. And I don't know if you tried to sing happy birthday over Zoom, but it's really bad. But the thought was there, and you know, everyone made sure that she had a really great day. We've been doing other things. So there's, you know, in terms of alternative training, there's been yoga, which has been organised by one of a retired athlete, but that's been with the Olympic squads as well. So that's been quite nice, because anyone who's logged on to yoga, you're sort of having conversations with some of the Olympic squads and chatting to people you maybe don't speak to on your kind of weekly rounds. We've done, one of my favorite things is we've done some cook-alongs, which has been amazing. So I think we've got a picture. So that's Martin, who's our head chef, and his little girl, who made a cameo appearance. She unfortunately wasn't the best sous chef, so he kicked her out of the kitchen. But that's actually the whole four there. And what is really, really lovely is that I think, you know, a variety in the way you communicate with your squad and with each other is really key. So Foxy, who's kind of top middle, is doing a lot of his training on his bike. So he hasn't joined us for a lot of those kind of challenge sessions. And Ollie, bottom right, is the one who loves erging, and he's just been cracking out the miles. But this is something that's entirely different. It's not rowing related, and it's something that we all enjoy. We've all been able to kind of get stuck into. And yeah, so Martin's basically sends out a list of ingredients. It's you know, part of the whole adventure, trying to find them. He did put wholemeal flour on there, so we all had to you know, try and go through every single shop to try and find some sort of flour. But we've been making like incredible things that we wouldn't have been making normally, and just having a great time in the process, spending some time with each other in a really non-traditional way. So that's been really, really fun. And then we've also been given sort of different movement challenges to do, sort of a bit of a mastermind from Tom, our weights coach, and Pat is the king of Pilates and is always trying to kind of increase our flexibility. And I talk a lot in the boat about kind of using your brain when you train, particularly kind of in rowing. It requires a lot of technical skill as well as a bit of brute force. So these movement challenges have been pretty interesting for some of our less coordinated athletes. So this week we had the handstand challenge. I'm sure you've seen a lot of gymnasts doing it, and I'm sure you know that rowers are no gymnasts, so that's been quite interesting. But you know that when you're doing a handstand against the wall, and you've got to try and get a t-shirt on. Unfortunately, we don't have a video of that because that's hot off the press from this week, but we do have a video of the shoe challenge that went around a few weeks ago. I think it was a footballer who started it, I'm not sure, but essentially you're lying on your back with a trainer sort of on the sole of your foot, and you need to sort of do a full roll and manage to keep the trainer up. I think we've got a video.
Yeah, Sarah's got a video. This is not such an easy challenge. I think I realised my old hips are not capable of such movements, so I gave up on this one quite early.
This is the hardest bit.
There we go. Thanks, Sarah. You made that look extremely easy.
Yeah, I think it took quite a few more attempts for our athletes to actually get that done.
Yeah, very good. Cool.
So I have a quick question for you then. In light of this environment that you're creating, do you think there are any athletes that may be performing better or improving without the normal pressure that is upon you?
I think obviously the brakes have been put on the runaway train that obviously gathers speed as you get closer and closer to the Paralympics and any major championships. And sometimes it can feel really difficult to try and slow that down and dig into some of the more individual challenges that you've got burning in the back of your mind, because you just can't step away from the bulk of the training as you get closer. I think this has given us a bit of breathing space actually to get really individual. We're already quite an individualized program. But we've been having some really high quality conversations as a staff team, and including some of the athletes around areas that will take more time to crack. So some of the physical capabilities, some of the mobility issues that we know are long standing, we now have time and space to really get in on those and make a change before we get back on that train and start building momentum towards next year's main event. So I think it's actually offered us a bit of an opportunity there to crack some of the things that we might have been almost living with because we didn't have the time to tackle them coming towards the games. So I see that as an opportunity, and we're definitely capitalizing on that.
Yeah, I'd say that athletes are, we talked earlier, we're in a very prescriptive environment. All athletes, whatever their sport really, particularly if you're in a team sport, you're used to being told what to do and when to do it and all of that, and that's what you sign up for, and that's part of being a world-class program. But I think we've got to take every opportunity that's given to us in these scenarios, and I think one thing that's been really positive, and maybe where people are improving, not necessarily just physically, but they are probably becoming more accountable. They have to be responsible for their own training. There's elements of sort of checking in with the coaches, but ultimately, it's entirely down to you getting up every morning, getting dressed and training, in the same way that for anyone working from home, it's all very easy to sort of work from your dressing gown and sit on your sofa and have loose women on in the background. But we've got to be proactive if we want to progress. And I don't have any doubts in our squad that everyone is really hungry for 2021, and it sort of forced people to sort of maybe do some self-reflection, which was required to take some emotional space sort of away from, as Nick said, sort of the runaway train towards Tokyo, and really reflect on what's important to them and build that into their training, which hopefully then we can take those positives into group training whenever that happens.
Great, thank you, Erin. So first and foremost, we're in a health crisis. So I think thinking more broadly than just the programme, what do you think lockdown has challenged you and your rowers to think about, Nick?
Well, I think we all recognise that elite sport is on the back burner at the moment, as is professional sport. And as much as I love that world and I live in that world pays my salary. I think that's right. I think it should be on the back burner. I think there are much bigger things going on in the world at the moment, and our focus should be elsewhere. Health, family, all these things are going to come first, and they should be at the moment. And I think we've encouraged some of the athletes to really engage with some of the things they'd like to be doing outside of the program. So, for example, one of our rowers has chosen to start a COVID mutual aid group in Henley. So she's actually coordinating getting supplies out to the people in most need in that area and at most risk, which has been really good. Like, she's coordinating that entire effort basically from home. She's been out leafleting, making sure people are aware that opportunity is there and that there are people willing to help. That's been really positive. We've encouraged that. One of our athletes has actually been running PE lessons online, trying to help some of the parents who are struggling with homeschooling, and that's been really well received. So he's been putting those up completely free, just trying to take that pressure off all those people that are dealing with children at home and trying to work, and all the other bits that they're now sort of being loaded up with. We've also had rowers going out into rowing clubs. So one of the rowers actually ran a power strokes club for Swansea, and hosted an online session. I think they probably got a bit more than they were expecting. He's not the he's one of our harder taskmasters, so I think they had a pretty rough ride of that power stroke session, but they really enjoyed it. And it was really nice seeing some of the screen captures of people just having a laugh, smiling, enjoying rowing again, even in this sort of really restricted world that we're living in. So that was brilliant. You know, even on a coaching front, I was planning on doing something this summer for the My Name's Doddy charity, which is obviously for motor neuron disease. I was planning on running a marathon, and the brakes have been put on that. That event's been cancelled. So the chief coach and myself have basically signed up to do a marathon on the ski erg on the same date. And we're going to try and raise some money for that charity as well, because there's so many charities, as you've seen with the 2.6 challenge, that are going to be really struggling through this pandemic. And whatever we can do in whatever small way to try and keep their head above water, I think we should find a way of making it happen. And that was our way of just trying to keep raising some funds for that charity. So that was the sort of selfless plug there. Other bits we've got going on. So I think the space you've got now, you should be using to really connect with your athletes and staff to get some open, honest feedback. Like take the time to design some 360s and get some reflection and information from your athletes on how they've found the program over the last couple of years. Get some really quality information that you can use to improve your programs going forward. So rare that, especially club coaches, you know these guys are volunteers, often working outside of other jobs. They're absolutely flat out with very little time, and now the brakes are on. Take that time and use it to refine things. Gather that information from your athletes that you don't often have time to really get stuck into how they're feeling and what they're thinking. And there's some real benefits to be had there, because this will be over soon, and we'll be straight back on the throttle, and you'll wish you'd use the time to do some of those things when you can't.
Yeah, I'd just say as well, I'm someone who just fills my time constantly, and actually I've tried to, don't know how successfully, but you know, take the opportunity to have a bit of self-reflection as well. You know, what are the things that you wish you had time to do but you don't, and that's you know, like doing some studying or you know, spending some time kind of reflecting on what you can do better as an athlete or as a coach, or in whatever role it is, because we rarely have this time, and as Nick said, time will go pretty quick. Like I feel like it's starting to fly by. You know, we're very nearly in May, and then you know this will end, and we will go back to sort of some semblance of normality. And what is it that you've taken from, you know, this period that you actually want to bring back into what you're restarting? Like there's no reason that it has to be exactly the same. This might have been a great opportunity to take a break, have a refresh, have a brainstorm, and make it even better than it was before.
Thank you both. Now, we see a lot of messages about staying connected, and I know, Nick, that you're a great advocate for what's right for the individual. So how have you tried to balance the individual's needs with the wider team dynamic? Yeah,
so I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced the sort of video call fatigue, and at times in the last few weeks, I'm sure whatever you've been doing on video calls, you felt as though sometimes you're just on them to appear busy or to fill your diary. And you know, I think that's actually really dangerous. You can get really quite tired and quite fed up. Your mood can change. The quality of your interaction goes right downhill. And I think you've got to work out what your athletes really need. Like some of the people I've been working with are really enjoying some space. They probably had enough of me at the best of times, and I think it's healthy now to get some space away from the squad and recharge, because next year is going to be very full on. You know, it's going to be hard. There's going to be ups and downs. It's going to take a lot of emotional energy, and pushing the guys now, always checking in. How are you doing in the current situation? If you get asked that 15 times a day from 15 people, it can get really quite tiring. So it goes back to the part, you know, we were talking about at the beginning of this chat, is make sure that the interaction with your athlete is quality. Make sure that there is space to just have casual conversation. You don't always have to be checking in and checking on how people are doing. Just ask them about things wider than that. So that's really important. There are, of course, others that are going to really require more contact and a bit more caring at the moment. Perhaps keeping their mind a bit busier will help them cope with this, and that's fine, you know. And I think both of those approaches won't be consistent. People will have ups and downs. People will need more contact. People will need less, and you'll just have to use your understanding of those people to try and balance the amount of contact you have with them. I think when we do come back together, there is going to be an interesting blending of the waters, where people have had their own space to do their own thing and had this breather that will have been very good for them, and then all of a sudden we're back in a crew squad environment where you do have to compromise your way of operating a little bit to work best with others. And I think framing that in any environment, any training environment, is going to be really important before you step through the door and it hits everyone like a shovel in the face, because we will have to go back to compromising a little bit. That's how any relationship, any team works. And if we can frame that and have good conversations before we do it, then it'll be a much smoother transition back into our training environments.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Erin?
I think that just for the coaches out there, sort of trust your instincts on your own athletes. You know, the pandemic's changed some things, but ultimately the extroverts are probably still the extroverts, the introverts are probably still the introverts. I think that the balance that we've sort of organically come to with sort of compulsory Tuesday meetings, with the sort of, we have then optional sort of drop-in coffee mornings, you know, it's fairly naturally shifted into, you know, the early risers / very sociable ones are normally the ones on the call at 8:30, and then the people who, you know, on training camps or in whatever environment are the ones that tend to, you know, spend more time on their own, are the ones who will be less likely to be in those chats, unless it's someone's birthday and we've forced them to jump online at 8:30. But I think kind of don't change too much. I think I found it particularly overwhelming because I was part of the athlete rep group. We were meeting more than once a week as well. Lots of questions coming in from athletes. And I'd say I'm a pretty sociable, extroverted person, and even I was finding Zoom. I just wanted to turn it off. So I was finding that quite a lot in the first week or so, and it's really settled down. But don't change too much, and just be flexible. I think ultimately we're, you know, you're dealing with people first, and then athletes. And as Nick said, sport's taking a little bit of a back burner for now, but for some people that might be what they're relying on for their normality and stability. So it's just reflecting that in the way you're dealing with individuals.
Fantastic, thank you both. I'm just conscious of the time, and it's amazing how fast an hour goes. I guess one sort of final thought from you both. Erin, maybe if I can come to you first. Erin, if you had a piece of advice for the coaching community during this pandemic, what would that be?
I'd say don't have a huge reaction to the situation and change everything that you were doing. You know, you have built a club and a team and a squad of athletes that are there because not just because they like rowing, but they like each other, and there'll be kind of you know, far more complicated and complex social relationships that, you know, even you're aware of, and friends within the squad, and there's it's rowing as a community. It's not just a sport, and it adds value far beyond what you do on an ergo or you do in a boat. And I'd say, you know, foster and nurture that community in whatever is right for your club, whether that is training together or whether that's a pub quiz once a month. And, you know, with concerns about people coming back, if you make your club and your sort of mantra about enjoying the sport, you know, looking after each other in this time, then I have no doubt that rowers, whatever age, whatever kind of level, will want to come back and engage, because I do really believe that rowing is about the people, not just about the boats. So.
I think you're on mute, Sarah. Don't worry.
You're on mute. Nick, have you got any other sort of thoughts on that, on advice perhaps to the coaching community?
Yeah, I would say I just encourage the coaches to be creative, be compassionate. Do what you can to keep people in love with the sport, because it's a great sport. And you know, if that requires you to defy convention a little bit, don't be afraid to do that. It's fine. Just do whatever it takes to get people through this and keep them in love with rowing a boat fast. However you can come up with ways of doing that, and make sure you share ideas with the coaching community as well. Just pick up the phone to someone, even if you've never spoken to them before. If you see them doing something interesting on social media or online, pick up the phone and ask them about it. Like, people will be so willing to share and help at the moment, because we're all going to need to do that to get through this. Hopefully this is going to be a once in a lifetime event. I'm not planning on this happening again in my lifetime, so I'm kind of hoping, fingers crossed, that this is you know, only going to happen once. But let's stay solution focused as well. Let's not just sort of look at something as a wall and think, well, there's no way around that. There's always a way around it. And you know, grabbing other people to help you over it is one of the best ways to do that. And if we all work together well, we should come out of this a stronger and a better connected community with a much bigger skill set than we went into it, because we've had to find a way around things. So that would be my steer.
And Erin, one just last question to you really is around any advice to coaches about how they can develop their coxes during this time?
Yeah, I always think that sometimes, yeah, coaching of coxes is sometimes you know, overlooked sometimes, particularly when, you know, things are busy. And actually this could be a great opportunity to really upskill your coxes. I feel like there's always a lack of coxes, you know, nationwide, so this maybe could be your recruitment opportunity. For me, I think some of the biggest part of coxing is confidence and sort of understanding what the role is. So, you know, whether that's getting together your coxes and maybe having a listen to some recordings. There's quite a few very good ones online, and if you struggle to find them, then drop and Sarah an email through this, and then through Sarah I'm more than happy to kind of point you in the right direction. One thing that I did when I was first trialing for the Paralympic squad, if your coxes have individual recordings, one of the things that we did when I was trialing for the squad was that we basically played through the recording, and Nick and Tom was sort of stopping and starting. So, you know, a 7-minute recording took about 25 minutes to get through, because we were kind of discussing, okay, what did you mean by that? I like your tone here, this is good, or, you know, this minute is a little bit flat, and sort of picking out, you know, positives and negatives, and kind of coming away with quite a lot of constructive feedback in a very detailed, specific way. And we did that with training pieces, recordings, and sort of high octane pieces as well. I'm not going to lie, it's pretty stressful for the coxswain. It's really awkward listening to your voice back and picking through it, but it forces you to actually think about what you're saying. There's very little you can probably do in terms of, you know, the technical steering side of things. So focus in on what you can, which is understanding your athletes. So encouraging your coxes to maybe check in on athletes and see how they're getting on. Considering maybe some of the sports psychology podcasts. I've been listening to quite a few. Again, I can point you in the right direction, because I think a huge amount of what a coxswain does is tapping into the brains of the athletes. And then, yeah, coxswain recordings.
Fantastic, thank you for that. Well, I'm going to say that we are all out of time. So really, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody that has attended this evening. The videos and slides will be available on the lockdown webinar page of the British Rowing website, www.britishrowing.org, and you'll also find the details of the next webinars in the series. You'll also shortly receive a request for some feedback for the webinar. Your feedback is really important, as it does help us to shape future webinars. You can join us this Thursday for a technique webinar with Mark Wilkinson and James Loveday, who will be discussing the front end of the sculling stroke. So it really remains for me just to say a huge thank you to Nick Baker and Erin Kennedy for presenting tonight's webinar, and to British Rowing's official analytics partner SAS for their support in this lockdown webinar series. So thank you very much, everybody, and good night.